a fad, Beatlemania. The Beatles created some of the sound and borrowed the rest from Chuck Berry and the Rockers. The new music startled many, but when the first wave of British rock groups hit our shores, they never left. In the mid-70s, another kind of rock began across the Atlantic. At its worst, punk promoted violence and fear with music from a group called the Sex Pistols. God save the Queen. She ain't no human being. The new rock eventually blended with American music, and that's when a new wave of music evolved, from driving rock to music mixed with ethnic sounds like Jamaican reggae. The rock rebels aren't easily classified. They are high school and college kids, and those who fancy themselves as artists. Growing numbers of young people are attracted to its angry renegade style. Most share a dislike of the commercial and an overwhelming desire to be noticed.
It's new wave, and that has its own definition. It's not punk, and it's very new. I mean, it has a lot of energy, and it's not violent energy. It's creative. It's creative energy.
It started in Europe with the lower class people. They weren't noticed. And they start piercing their eyes and their noses and their cheeks, and they got noticed.
It's something to bite into. It's not your basic Eagles. It's not California, lay in the sun and have a good time. It's, you can get into it, you know, and like a lot of people, we're sick of disco. Disco's,
Their whole society collapsing, that's what they have to fear. Not us, just their own overblown society collapsing is what they have to fear.
Some of the things happening in the music scene here in town are rehashes of what happened in the new wave scene a couple years ago somewhere else.
Just like the rockers of the 50s and 60s, the children of the 80s want to be different. This week you'll hear their music and meet the rebels who follow it. Bebe Burns, Channel 2 News. The names of St. Louis's new wave bands sound like a return to the early days of the Beatles. They have names like the Felons and the Trained Animals. Most play at dingy community halls, trying to build an audience. The best known is a two-man band called Brown and Langerer. Singer and songwriter Charlie Langerer says the new music has much to say about politics. That's part of its attraction.
Listen, we don't need a war in El Salvador. If you want to give aid, give it to the poor.
Since new wave music is inspired by some of the post-Watergate generation who've become jaded about politics, many critics complain that the music is too negative, that it doesn't take a stand for anything. Langerer says that's changing.
Some of the British groups, the two-tone groups, take a stand against racism. Some of the groups that have women in them from Britain take a stand against sexism. So I think we're beginning to see people take a more positive, assertive attitude toward choosing a place.
Langerer does fear that new wave fans in St. Louis are simply parroting fashions and music from other cities, rather than creating something new.
People in St. Louis accept the fact that we're always 5 or 10 years behind. Why don't we start our own avant-garde here? Why don't we have our own forefront of things? Why don't we set our own styles, have our own music and our own ways of dance and dress?
There are rock rebels who still don outrageous punk hairdos, and more people are beginning to wear a mishmash of 50s and 60s clothing. Finding those relics from the recent past is becoming a big business. You'll see tomorrow night. Bebe Burns, Channel 2 News. One way the rebels take a style and exaggerate it is by coloring their hair in the most outrageous ways. A bastion of the punk hairdo is a shop in Creve Coeur called Divine Miss M, where you can get bleached and dyed to just about any color. preferably one never before seen in nature.
These crazy colors, they come from Europe, and they last about 6 to 7 weeks in your hair. But this depends all on your hair, and this is kind of a new thing that's been going on, but it's really old. It's new for St. Louis, but it's old in Europe, and on the east and west coast, it's been going on for about 6 years.
I was real bored with not having any color in my hair. I didn't feel normal. Now I do.
For some, punk hair colors are already passé, but the popularity of 50s and 60s clothing is definitely growing. St. Louis is becoming a fashion center of sorts for the new wave scene, largely due to the work of this man, Tom Haxton. Haxton bought a Southside warehouse full of new, old clothes. Everything from outlandish sunglasses to pointed-toed shoes. Now he sells in volume to European buyers.
I understand that you just had a group of French buyers that bought a lot of stuff. What kind of stuff did they buy?
Oh, they bought everything, all kinds of suits. They bought Polish scientist suits, they bought Beatles suits, they bought many pointy-toed shoes, capris, pedal pushers, the ladies' pants in different lengths, Bermudas, a lot of shark skin pants, a lot of shark skin suits, a lot of shark skin shirts. I've been doing this for a year and a half now, so sometimes people call me, and that's always good because I'm always looking to buy, you know, good quality merchandise. That usually anything that was made before 1965 I'll buy if it's good, clean stock, and so it's great when people call me.
Since new musicians borrowed much of their energy from the rock of the 50s, it's not surprising to Tom Haxton that young people want to wear 50s and 60s styles. For many new wave fans, it's easier to find a pair of 1950s sunglasses than it is to find a new record from the hottest new rock bands, largely because the rock rebels have fought the music establishment. You'll see how tomorrow night. Bebe Burns, Channel 2 News. Most new wave music is played only on small college stations, like Washington University's KWUR. General Manager Peter Steinberg explains.
I get the feeling many times in the music industry and in commercial radio, they're always asking, what worked before? They're always looking for last year's sound. Too many stations and music companies are always trying to figure out what sold a lot of records last year, and let's try to look for that same sound instead of looking forward.
Most commercial radio stations are still assessing whether new wave is a fad, so they play only the safe bets, like the music of Blondie. The new music is just beginning to creep onto local rock station KSHE. Program manager Shelley Grafman says his older rock audience prefers to hear the supergroups. He hints that many new wave groups have a narrow appeal.
Groups that were labeled new wave, like Blondie and Joe Jackson, Elvis Costello, and some of the other groups that initially were labeled the new wave artists, have in a sense adopted some measure of commercialism. Part of it's a result of their efforts to survive. Some of the other groups are more dedicated and more committed to that narrow form of sound, and whether they'll survive as a result of that decision-making is speculation.
Commercial radio isn't the only rock business shying away from the new rock and roll. The rock rebels declared war on the record companies from the very beginning. Now thousands of bands are producing their own records on small labels.
Most of the bands that are out now are like on independent labels. And to be on an independent label, you are not owned by a corporation, you know. And they get a lot of freedom in what they say, what they play, and the ideas that they're trying to convey, you know, and it's, I admire that.
Don McClintock co-owns one of the only stores in town which sells the hottest new wave music. He says it's a small but growing audience, and McClintock can't understand why the record companies and radio stations are ignoring it. Buying records is the least of the problems facing the rebels who follow the new music. There are no good new wave clubs. Those that are trying to make a go at it exist in bad neighborhoods, don't have liquor licenses, and have little or no security. You'll learn about that tomorrow night. Bebe Burns, Channel 2 News. Traditional nightclubs are shying away from new wave music. Most of the audience is under drinking age, and what clubs are trying to stay open are often located in areas of high street crime, like the Stroll.
The nicer places where you can go hear new wave, for all intents and purposes, are dive bars.
Many more of the younger people are more in tune to what is happening with new music and stuff, it seems, in this town. Now, maybe it's just because an adult club hasn't developed an adult audience yet.
The new wave music scene is caught in a kind of catch-22. If it does become popular and commercially appealing to club owners, will it lose its renegade following? Will it become another fad passed over by a restless elite?
Yeah, we dispose of fads. I hope we dispose of this. It'll go on to something else.
Is there any possibility this is going to turn out just like music did in the late 60s? With the domination of supergroups and...
Well, it's probable that a lot of things turn stale after they've become over-commercialized. But I'd also like to temper that with the notion that just because something's commercially successful doesn't mean it's bad.
There's not that many people doing it yet. As soon as this gets to be full scale and you get the Ramones or whatever, at the Checker Gum, it's going to be just as bad.
Exploited. So in other words, you think that commercialism can take this over like it has other forms of rock and roll?
I think it could. I hope it doesn't, because then we'll just have to find something else to do.